put me up against what I saw around me in St. Thomas. And I saw great heroism, people going to their jobs, and I saw great evil side by side. I saw people killed on the sidewalk. Kenny Singleton, right under where the sister's apartment was, he got in an argument with somebody over sunglasses, and the guy goes up to his apartment. Everybody has guns, comes down, bang, bang, bang. There's Kenny dead on the sidewalk, and that was the first of many, many funerals that we as sisters went to. Young guys being picked up by the police. Later, when I wrote Dead Man Walking, and I did research, I found out the city of New Orleans had more complaints about police brutality to the Justice Department than any other city in the United States. And I was blind to it. I was like, well, I wouldn't be afraid. If my car broke down on the highway and a state trooper pulled up, I'd be happy, like, hey, I'm gonna get some help. I woke up, and it was seeing the suffering. That's what lit the flame in my heart. That's how the passion, because Earlene Dent is talking about our boys and what's happening to them in the projects and how they're getting involved with the drug dealers. And she goes, sister, we don't have money to move to another part of this city. We can't afford rent. Since Hurricane Katrina, rents have tripled in New Orleans. And all the main public housing has been torn down, so poor African-American people cannot move back in the city. And many people know, some say it out loud, that they were waiting to change the demographics of the city and use the hurricane to do that. Very important thing I learned from Gandhi, that whenever people in a society do something, they always think they're doing something that's good or that's necessary. And those of us who see through it and see that what is being done is evil and it is not good, what we have to do is we always have to resist the evil. More is required than being swept along. You have to resist the evil, and you have to uncover it, to expose it, so that others can see it too, so that you can work for good. 20 years of crisscrossing this country and talking to the American people about the death penalty. When I'm in England or when I'm in Europe, and they say, what is it about the people of the United States? Why are your people so vengeful? Why do you have the death penalty? And you know what I found? It's not that people are that vengeful, that they've thought through the death penalty, and yes, we must have it. People never think about it. It's not one of the moral issues that touches most people personally. They don't know anybody on death row. And the death penalty is not a peripheral moral issue about what to do with some terrible criminals that have done these terrible crimes. All the deep wounds of our society are in the practice of the death penalty. Racism is in it. Overwhelmingly, it's the people who kill white people who get selected for death. Thank God you have the sense and the moral wisdom in Wisconsin that you've never bought into the death penalty. And I'm sure there have been politicians. Yes. And when I wrote Dead Man Walking, I wrote it in the first person present tense, and I take you with me. As things unfold for me, they unfold for you. And the meeting of him was an amazing, it was such a profound experience to look into his eyes, because I guess I expected that somehow his face was going to look different because he had murdered somebody. And that because someone had murdered somebody, they must have like a kind of glint in their eye or a set to their jaw. And when the guards brought him in, I was shocked at how human his face was. And he was smiling, and he said, sister, thank you for making the drive and coming to see me. I went, oh my God, he's a human being. And the insight to see, which has never left me, whatever he has done, he is worth more than the worst act of his life, as are we all, worth more than the worst act of our lives. So I'm learning a lot as I go. And then to be with Patrick, to be there when they kill him, to be there with a man for 2.5 years that I visited and knew and accompanied and knew his fears and knew his remorse. He said, sister, it was never supposed to happen. Those 2 kids were killed that night, and I believe him. And when they would dim the lights on the tier on death row at midnight, he'd kneel down by his bunk with his Bible, which I have. I see the parts of the Bible that he underlined, Psalms I'd never noticed before. Psalm 31, oh God, they plot to take my life, but you are my rock, on you I stand. The more we learn about Jesus, the more we learn about any of the spiritual traditions, that God, the Holy One, is always on the side of the victim, of the one being rendered defenseless and taken out and killed. Always. It's not to make Patrick Sonnier into a great hero that he did something great. I mean, I'm horrified, and I just talked to the LeBlanc family last week. Every day of their life, they have to set their face to live again in light of what happened to David. And then to be with him, with Patrick. And as we're getting close to the death house is the most surreal thing you can imagine. The tiles are all polished, coffee pots brewing, witnesses are coming in. They're serving sandwiches and coffee and refreshments to the press in another room. We're going to have an event tonight. The electrician comes in to check the chair, the lights all dim in the death house, the hours. The only way you know he's going to die is with your mind and your watch. It's not like somebody dying in the hospital, because he's alive, he's fully alive. And you're talking the way you've been talking for 2.5 years, and you're praying together. And he's saying to me, sister, just pray God holds up my legs. Well, look, Sister Helen, you can't be there. You can't be there at the end. See, it was electrocution. They're going to pump 1,900 volts of electricity through his body. No, you can't be there. I don't want you to be scarred. I don't want you to be harmed by this. You've been with me all this time. You just pray God holds up my legs when I make the walk. And it was so strong. It just rose up inside me. I said, Patrick, there's no way. I don't know what it's going to do to me. I've never done this before. I don't care what happens to me. But you are not going to die without a face for you to look at that says that you have dignity, and I'll be the face of Christ. And I was so strong in that execution chamber. I was there with him. I walked with him. I put my hand on his shoulder. I read from Isaiah 43, I've called you by your name and you are mine. In the last words he heard with his ears as he walked. I don't know, do your ears hear words when you're walking across this stage and once you descend the steps and go through there? That's a place where they kill you, where you're dead, who knows what goes on in the human mind? And he looked at my face. The last thing they did was to put a leather mask over his face to protect the witnesses from seeing what happened to a human face when they killed him. But he saw my face. And I came out of that execution chamber. It was the middle of the night, outside the prison gates. The sisters were waiting. They put a coat around me. I was so cold. And I threw up, because I'd never watched a human being be killed in front of my eyes before. And the death penalty applies to our Mother Earth. While we've been here, every 20 minutes, if we'd had candles lit here and we'd have snuffed one out every 20 minutes, we're losing a species from this planet that can never be replaced. And it's one big matrix in the web of life. And compassion and justice extends to all the beings of earth. And so we have to learn how to make connections in this web of life. And what happens to our water, and what happens to our rivers, and what happens to our air, what happens to our animals. The people who work for animal rights, God bless them. Of course we got to work for animal rights. Of course we got to work for our earth. It's all connected. It's all a manifestation of God, the incarnation of God.